All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started on our webinar on the Advanced Bill Management Solution for NetSuite. My name is Christian Salvucci, and I wanted to thank you for joining us today. I'm the marketing coordinator here at SquareWorks Consulting. If you have any questions that come up throughout this webinar, please use the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We will be addressing all of those questions following the demo. So first, we'll start with some introductions. So we will be joined today with Seth Duda and David Singleton. Seth, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Seth Duda. I'm a NetSuite solution architect at SquareWorks. I'm the lead on all of our software development and excited to give a demo of our solution today.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Singleton. I'm the business development executive here at SquareWorks, and we're very happy to have everyone here today. So thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about SquareWorks for those of you who are not familiar with us. We're a boutique NetSuite Alliance and SDN partner. So we're a one-stop shop for implementations, optimizations, and support, but we also create native NetSuite add-ons, which are called bundles, to really improve the performance and your usability of NetSuite, mostly related in and around accounts payable. We're based out of Boston, but we work across the entire US and Canada. We have more than 180 customers across the US and Canada, and all of our consultants have at least 10 years of business experience, and everyone at SquareWorks is NetSuite certified. We've also been recognized by external organizations such as CIO Review as one of the top NetSuite solution providers. Today, we'll be taking a look at advanced bill management. This native NetSuite bundle is changing the way NetSuite clients work with its invoice detail capture process. By enabling the most powerful OCR technology combined with artificial intelligence, the solution can autofill all of your vendor invoice details without the need to maintain OCR templates. And then your manual entry becomes significantly less, which we will see in Seth's demonstration. You can upload your invoices directly into NetSuite from your email box or by using a drag and drop feature. It also improves financial controls with our approval workflow automation, which helps approve invoices through configurable workflows no matter how complex they might be. We also validate that vendor bills and receipts match purchase orders and are in compliance with predefined thresholds that you define using our three-way match. And all of this is done with a full audit trail and is 100% native. So what does this mean for you? Well, it's accessible anywhere that you can access NetSuite. It can enable your employees to maintain processes while working from home, which many of us are doing these days. But it helps you move the process forward as well through emails, while giving a full audit track with no need to walk across an office that you're not currently in, just to get things to move forward. Here are some of our clients, many of whom I'm sure you know, and we hope to have you as one someday too. Just a quick bit on some of the other bundles we've created: vendor request, journal entry, reversal, our check printing bundle, which is very popular, advanced attachments. But today we're talking about advanced bill management. So let me hand over the reins over to Seth Duda so you can actually see advanced bill management in action.
All right, thank you, David. I'm just going to share my screen and we can get started. So today I have two scenarios set up that we're going to walk through for advanced bill management. And the first scenario here, we're going to walk through a scenario where an invoice has been received from a vendor, but you're not using purchase orders in NetSuite, or maybe the invoice does not have a purchase order to associate to. So there's three steps we're going to go through. First step is the invoice upload process. I'm going to demo a drag and drop interface, so you can drag and drop an invoice right into NetSuite and have it upload, scanned using OCR, and captured. So that brings us to step number two, which is the invoice capture. I'm going to show how the OCR works. We'll see a split screen view to see that document side by side with your vendor bill form. And I just like to mention this kind of works out of the box with your, if you have an existing vendor bill form that's configured and you have customizations, it all kind of works out of the box. And then last, once you've captured all the details on your vendor bill, we're going to route that vendor bill for approval. That's step number 3. And I'm going to show how our email-based approvals work. And there's really no need for even an employee to have access to NetSuite to approve via email. I'll go slowly through all the steps in the demo. Once we're done with this scenario, we have one more scenario which covers when you have purchase orders involved. All right, so I'm going to jump over into NetSuite now, and we're going to start with the invoice upload. So after logging into NetSuite, under the vendors menu, we're going to find advanced bill management, and there's an upload invoices page. And this is our drag and drop interface to drag and drop one or more invoices right on the screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag an invoice right on the screen here. You can see my mouse and dropping it right there. You can drag and drop multiple documents at once. You don't have to do one by one. And I'm going to press upload. This is going to go out and it's going to scan the document in real time. It's going to look for key points of information such as your vendor, invoice number, amount, date, and even the line level details. And once it's scanned the invoice, it's going to bring you right to your vendor bill form. And this is the split screen view. So on the right-hand side, you have, really the native NetSuite vendor bill form. And on the left, you have a copy of the invoice that was uploaded in this split screen view. You can easily adjust the sizing by using this drag and drop interface right here. And what you're really going to notice on this screen is that it's pre-populated a lot of the information for you automatically based off of what was on the document. So that is leveraging our OCR engine. It's all done automatically behind the scenes for you. So really nothing for you to go and configure. And in this case, it extracted the vendor. So it says Delta Consultants. It selected that vendor based off of the vendor that was referenced in the document. Pulled in the invoice number right here, the amount, the date, and even the line information. So in this case, it pulled in an expense line, and it selected the category, the account, the amount, the memo, department, and class all automatically for you, solely based off of this document and what you've entered in the past for other vendor bills for this particular vendor. So it really learns as it goes for a lot of information. All right, so at this point, let's go ahead and save the vendor bill. And once the vendor bill has been saved, it's going to, by default, be in a state where it has not been approved, so meaning it's not GL impacting, it can't be used for payment purposes. So the first step, once you save the vendor bill, is to actually submit it for approval. So on this screen, you're going to see a submit button that's added as part of our solution at the top, and an approval history tab at the bottom, which is also added as part of our solution. The approval history tab is going to show you a full audit trail of each step of the approval process, who approved it, date and time it was approved, and so on. And you'll see this approval history tab update once I submit it for approval. So I'm going to go ahead and press submit. And based off of an approval process I have pre-configured, it's going to route this vendor bill for approval. And I actually have a approval process set up with 2 steps. The first step in the approval process for this demo is to route it to a particular employee for approval. And then once they approve, it's going to route it for role-based approval. It's going to route it to the CFO role for approval. Once both of those steps are complete, that's when this vendor bill would be marked as fully approved. So let's go down to the approval history tab now that I've submitted this. And we see one line here. And just to highlight some key points. So under the approvers column, it's showing my name and David's name. So I set up the scenario just to submit this to myself and David whenever a vendor bill is submitted for approval. And it says any, meaning that either of us could approve this step. So basically the first one in is going to win. The other information listed here shows the type of approval. So this is employee-based approval. There's other types of approvals such as role-based, group-based, hierarchy-based. But it's just basically you're designating one or more employees that could approve this, and that's what employee means. Approval step is just a description of the step we're on. So we're on the first step. We have the date and time that this was requested for approval and a status over here. So at the top here, since I'm logged in as myself, I see approve and reject buttons at the top. And I could do this right in NetSuite. I could click approve. I could put in a comment if I like, optionally, and press OK to approve this first step. Or I could reject it, put in a rejection reason, and press OK to reject it. And that would basically go back to the submitter, where the submitter could maybe edit this vendor bill, and then resubmit it for approval. But I really want to highlight the email-based approval aspect of this product, which is really nice. You can actually approve right from email, and you don't even need access to NetSuite, and you can actually approve right on your mobile phone, which is great. So I'm just going to open up the email that I received on the screen. All right. So here's a copy of the email. This is because I was listed as an approver, I received this email. In this email, it's fully configurable, but what I have in here is just some high-level information at the top about what is being requested for approval. At the bottom, we have information about the actual vendor bill. So all these fields come right from your vendor bill form. Any field that you would normally see on a vendor bill form can be added to the email very easily. And we also include an attachment. So the attachment, if I open that up, drag it over, this is just a copy of that original invoice that was uploaded to NetSuite. So the approver via email really has all the information they need. They have a copy of the original invoice. They have details about the vendor bill at the bottom to actually be able to approve or reject right from email. So if I click approve in my email, what it does is it just opens up a new email message. I can optionally put in a comment if I'd like to approve, and then I just press send. So that response would go back to NetSuite. NetSuite would receive that response via email, make sure that whoever sent that response back is actually one of the approvers that's been requested to approve. And if everything lines up, it would mark that request as approved and move on to the next step of the approval process, which is the role-based approval that I have set up. You can also reject via email by clicking the reject button, put in a rejection reason if you'd like, and press send. And I did mention before, this works for employees that don't even have access to NetSuite. So if you do have multiple employees that you'd like to approve vendor bills or POs, this works in multiple places, you can actually have those employees approve as well. They don't need a license to NetSuite, which can be a cost savings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into NetSuite, and I'm just going to approve right through the UI. So let me just come in here, click approve. I'll put in a comment. It's optional, but I'll just write approved and press OK. This is going to mark the first step of this approval process as approved and move on to the next step. So I'll wait for the page to reload. Go back to the approval history tab. And we're going to see the first row has been marked as approved. I've highlighted it right here. We have who approved it and the date and time it was approved down below. And then the comment that I left is on the far right. Since there are two steps of this approval process, it's now showing that the CFO role has been requested to approve. You can see under the approval step column, it says number 2, CFO approval. If I click on the CFO link right here, I can see who the employees are that are assigned a particular role. So if you do have maybe an AP role that has multiple employees, very easy to basically route something to a particular role, and then the first person who approves this with that role would mark this step as approved. Since I'm not logged in as the CFO, I now want to highlight another great feature of this approval process, which is it's called Superproofers. So what it means is that one or more roles in NetSuite you can assign as a superprover, and it's going to give those employees with that role more privileges as it relates to modifying approval processes on the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch over to my administrator role, which I have designated as a superprover. And I'm going to go right back to that vendor bill I was working on to show you what looks a little bit different as the administrator. Let's go back to the approval history tab. So first thing at the bottom under CFO, since I'm logged in as a superapprover, I have a change approver link. And this is going to allow any employee with this privilege to change the approval process on the fly. When I click Change Approver, what happens is it opens up a new dialog where I can actually change on the fly the role. So I could switch CFO to a different role if I'd like. I could even change the approval type. So I could say, instead of this being role-based approval for the second step, maybe I want it to be employee-based approval or group-based approval. So there's a lot of flexibility for a Superprover to change things on the fly if needed. But it's just important to highlight that this is limited to particular roles. Not everyone logging into NetSuite will have this capability. So what I'm going to do is let's just change this to a different role. So I'm going to change this to the administrator role. Since I have the administrator role assigned to me, I'll put in a reason for the change, out of office. And I'm going to press save. And once this saves, I'll go back to the approval history tab to show you what impact that has. All right, so just a review of what happened. So the second row here, if I highlight here, it now shows approval canceled. It has the date and time this was canceled and by who. And on the far right, the reason why it was canceled. So I left this out of office message in the change. And now I added a third row. We're basically overriding the CFO role with a new approver. So in this case, we're saying the administrator role has the ability to approve on behalf of the CFO at this point for step number 2. If I click on the administrator link here, I can see all the administrators that have been assigned. If this is not correct, I could easily click Change Approver to change it to someone else. But since let's say that is correct, I now have the ability to approve and reject right through the UI because I have logged in as the administrator. One other capability related to Superprover that we like to highlight is the Superproof button at the top. So the Superproof button is going to give any Superprover the ability to really bypass approval steps if necessary. So they can basically, if for whatever reason they just need to mark the vendor bill as fully approved, that's what this capability is used for. So there's a few ways that Superprover can change things on the fly. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch back to my original role. I was logged in as the AP clerk. We're just going to go back to the vendor bill since we're done talking about the Superprover functionality and come back to the approval history tab. Okay, so we're still talking about this last step here. So we're looking at administrator approval. And you're going to notice on the upper right of my screen, I'm logged in as the AP clerk. However, I still have approve and reject buttons at the top. This approval solution, which is built into Advanced Bill Management, is going to look at all of the roles that you have assigned. As long as one of those roles is, in this case, administrator, it's going to give you approve and reject buttons regardless. So that's why I see these buttons at the top. So let's go ahead and approve this. I'll put in a comment. Let's put test and press OK. And this should complete the approval process. Since there were 2 steps set up in this approval process, once those 2 are done, the vendor bill will be marked as fully approved and can be used for payment. Okay, let's just look at the approval history tab once more. We're going to see that the first line here has been marked approved for step number 1. And then for step number 2, we have the administrator approved, date and time, comment. At the very top, we'll see the vendor bill is now marked as open, and I could make payment using just native NetSuite. The last thing I want to highlight is, let's say you want to see the original invoice that was used to generate this vendor bill. Our solution adds a View Invoice button, which makes it very easy to see that original document. So when I click View Invoice, it's going to bring me right back to a split screen view where I can see the vendor bill and the original document side by side again. All right, so that wraps up scenario number 1. And just a quick recap of what we went through. We did the invoice upload via drag and drop. We captured the details using OCR. We looked at a split screen view. And then we went through an approval routing process. We're now going to move on to demo scenario number 2, which involves a purchase order. So at a high level, the process is very similar. We're still going to go through the invoice upload step where you drag and drop the invoice right into NetSuite. We're still going to do the invoice capture. However, the one difference here is that we're actually going to link this to a purchase order. And you're going to see, as I demo this, it's going to link the purchase order, or sorry, it's going to link the vendor bill to the purchase order automatically based off of what it extracts from the document that you upload. And then a new step we're adding along the process is the array match. Since we are associating a vendor bill to a purchase order, we can now start comparing what is being entered on the vendor bill to what was entered originally on the purchase order and what has been received against the purchase order. And I'll show that as we go through the demo. And then last, we're going to go through approval routing again. What I want to highlight for that last step is how the approval process can dynamically change on the fly. So in this scenario, I actually have it set up to require an additional step in the approval process if there's any three match violations that are found as part of this process. So I'm going to jump over to the NetSuite now to show this scenario. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to go back to vendors, advanced bill management, and upload invoices. And this time I'm going to upload similar. I'm going to upload one document. However, this document that I'm uploading has a reference to a purchase order number in it. All right, so we'll let it wait for it to scan the information. So it's also looking, we'll try to extract a purchase order number from the document. So let's quickly look on the left-hand side. You see on the document it has PO number 5001. And on the right-hand side, again, similar, the exact same interface that you saw in the first scenario. It's pre-populating information. However, there's a purchase order drop-down here where you can select an open purchase order to associate to this vendor bill. In this scenario, actually, I don't have any open purchase orders for Delta Consultants. So let's quickly, I'm going to quickly create a purchase order, and I'll show how it will automatically find that purchase order and link this vendor bill to a state. But let's just go ahead and create a new purchase order and go through that process quickly. So what I'm going to do, I'm just entering a purchase order. In this case, purchase order number 9002. I just have some item lines here, and I'm going to save this. And to basically, this is native NetSuite, but to create a purchase order, it needs to be approved and it needs to be received before you can have vendor bills entered against it. So I'm just going to quickly go through the process of submitting this purchase order for approval. I have a submit button up here. This submit process, this approval process, is very similar to the approval process I showed on the vendor bill form. Exact same technology that we're using behind the scenes. So it's going to look and feel exactly the same. So I click the submit. I now have a purchase order that can be approved. So if I go into the approval history tab, we're going to see again who the approvers are, the date and time is requested, and this current status. Let's go ahead and approve this so we can go ahead and receive the purchase order, and then we can actually generate a vendor bill against it. Okay, so it's approved. I'm going to receive it. Again, this receiving process is native NetSuite, but let's quickly receive this. I'm going to press save to record the receipt. I'm just receiving everything that was associated with the purchase order. And we should end up with a purchase order in a state where it's basically ready for a vendor bill to be generated. So let's go back to the purchase order and review. So purchase order is approved by supervisor pending bill. Great. So we have an open purchase order. It's approved, received. We're ready to go. So let's go back to our vendor bill. And I'm just going to refresh the screen. And we should see in the drop down the purchase order. So we have because we have an open purchase order for Delta Consultants, it's listed here. So I'm going to select that. And when I associate the vendor bill to the purchase order, the functionality is a little bit different. So what happens is we're going to leverage native NetSuite to look at what the open lines are on the purchase order to populate the line items on the vendor bill. So in this case, you see the items lines are populated. this information down here, this is all pulled right from the purchase order based off of what is available to have vendor bills generated for. But before I save this, the next step of the process I want to show is through match. So let's go ahead and click on the quantity, and let's try changing this to something that is greater than what I have received and also greater than the purchase order. So I'm going to change quantity to 60, press OK, and press save. Before this vendor bill is even saved, our solution is going to go out and run through match validation. And what this is going to do is going to compare the vendor bill you've entered and any other vendor bills that have been entered against this purchase order to what has been received for this purchase order and actually to the purchase order itself. And in this case, it's flagging a few potential issues. Let's move this up a little so we can compare. So the first line here, it says item line 1. So it's saying there's an issue or a violation for item line 1. And it's saying the quantity exceeds the PO. If I hover over this icon here, it's going to show me what was entered on the PO for the quantity versus what has been entered for the vendor bill. In this case, I've entered 60 and the PO was 50. If I had other vendor bills that have already been entered for this purchase order, it's going to actually look across all vendor bills when doing that comparison, which is very powerful. It's also going to look at amount. So in this case, the amount exceeds what was on the PO. And it also compares to what has been received. So very similar, if I hover over this one here, quantity exceeds receipt, is going to show you what has been received versus what you're trying to capture on the vendor bill. If this is okay, you can put in a reason for why this is okay. But if it's not, let's say there was just a mistake and you need to correct something quickly, I can press cancel, make a correction. Let's just put in 51 instead, and press save again. That same validation is going to run again. In this case, I've still exceeded a threshold. I'm still 1 over the quantity. But let's say that's okay, and I'll put in a reason for why this is okay. I'm just going to put in test here and press save with errors. All right, so now we have a vendor bill. It's been saved, is related to a purchase order. So if I go over to our related records, we should see that a purchase order has been linked to it. And if I were to go look at the purchase order itself, to refresh the purchase order, we should see that it's now showing quantity 51 has been billed. I received 50, the quantity was 50. So let's go back to the bill. At this point, we're to the approval process step. So this vendor bill needs to be submitted for approval. And one change you're going to see when I submit this for approval is that I've added an additional step in the approval process to say if there's any through match issues that were identified, then an additional step is required in the approval process. All right, so I've submitted it. Let's go to our approval history tab. And we're going to see it looks a little bit different. So we have an approver, David, and approval step is step 0, through match approval. So this knew that because there are through match issues, step number, in this case 0, is required before the other steps that we walked through would be required. When David logs in, he can easily look at the through match errors tab to see what was originally identified as an issue the last time this vendor bill was saved. If this is okay, David could come in, click approve, and that would move it along in the approval process. If that's not okay, David could easily come in, click reject, and that would route back to the submitter to make a correction, which then the vendor bill could then be saved and resubmitted for approval. So I'm not going to walk through all the additional steps. It works exactly the same way the approval process worked for this first scenario. And I think that wraps up the demo. So David, I think we're going to open up for questions, and I'll send things back to David.
Awesome, thank you, Seth. Dave,
Thank you,
if
Seth.
you'd like to pull up that contact slide and we'll jump into the questions.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so we did have a couple come in during that demo. I think most of them will be for you, Seth. So first and foremost, are you able to drag and drop a multi-page invoice?
So great question. So yep, it does support multiple page invoices. The one thing it does not support is if you have a PDF with multiple invoices in it. It expects one invoice per PDF, but multiple pages is perfectly fine.
Awesome. So the next question is the GL affected before or after bill approval?
So the GL is impacted after the vendor bill has been fully approved.
Awesome. And then we had another question about the drag and drop. So they've seen the drag and drop of invoices, but does the system allow for automation of pulling in invoices from an AP email inbox?
Yeah, great question. I actually forgot to mention that. So there's two ways to upload invoices in NetSuite. I showed the drag and drop interface. We also have an email upload interface. So we have whenever our solution is installed into account, a dedicated email address is generated by NetSuite, and you can direct any emails to that email address with PDF attachments. And it's going to work very similar to dragging and dropping. NetSuite's going to look at all of the attachments in the email and convert each PDF attachment into a separate invoice to be generated, to be saved as a vendor bill. The way that works, let me just quickly share my screen again, and I'll show you some more details. Do you mind? Yep. Okay. So when an email is received by NetSuite with attachments, it's going to put those into something called an invoice queue. So when I go to vendors, advanced bill management, there's another section here called invoice queue, which I didn't show. This is going to show you any invoice or document that has been uploaded into NetSuite, which hasn't yet been converted into a vendor bill. So if your email had 10 attachments on it, you would see 10 rows here. And then from here, you can click Create Bill to navigate to the vendor bill form with that split screen view to actually save the vendor bill. Once this vendor bill has been saved, it drops off of the queue. So it also works with the drag and drop. So if I drag and drop 10 invoices into NetSuite using our drag and drop interface, it's actually going to show 10 lines here in the queue to be converted to the vendor bill. And hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is, if we have bill ahead of receipt turned on, can we still tie to the PO?
Yep, so also great question. So if you have bill before receipt enabled, you can still tie it to the PO. The one thing our theory match engine will not do though is it's not going to compare to any receipts. So it's only going to compare what you've entered on your vendor bills to what you've entered on the purchase order when doing the theory match validation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. The next question is for PO's approval, will the approver need a NetSuite user license?
Also a good question. So nope, so you don't. So anytime you have approval set up using the kind of built-in approval logic that we have included, so that could be on purchase orders, vendor bills. It could also be set up on receipts. Anytime you use our solution, you do not have to have the user is not required to have a NetSuite license.
Mm-hmm.
However, like if a user needs to log in to view information directly in NetSuite, a NetSuite license would be required. So it only works if it's just strictly email-based approval.
Correct, thank you. So another question is, I see that your three-way match pop-ups have a text field which allows entering input. As far as I know, that's not available in NetSuite native dialogues. How do you do that?
How do we a lot of scripting behind the scenes. That's part of our solution. Yeah, there's a lot of logic behind the scenes that enables that. So it's a feature that we've built into our solution.
Right. Awesome. And then I think this question might have been addressed, but we can discuss it again. What if there are multiple POs on the invoice?
Right. So if there's multiple POs on the invoice, we currently support kind of a one-to-one relationship. So we assume an invoice will only have one PO. So if that is a rare occurrence where you do have invoices that have multiple POs, we're not going to stop you from using the native NetSuite way of going in and associating a vendor bill to multiple purchase orders. We're not going to get in the way of that. So you can still use native NetSuite to do that. but our OCR solution, kind of that split screen view where you select the purchase order that you want associated with, assumes kind of a one-to-one relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually, I just want to highlight, because it is a good question. So the other thing I like to highlight is that our solution kind of sits on the side of the vendor bill process in NetSuite. So if you're already going into NetSuite and manually creating vendor bills, and maybe you even have an approval process set up or other customizations, by installing our solution, it kind of sits on the side. So we're not going to stop you from doing what you're currently doing today. We're really making it easier to do what you're doing today. So we're going to add that drag and drop. We're going to add email-based upload, which is going to really assist with the vendor bill creation process. And then if you want to leverage our approval solution, it works really well with our approval solution. You can, but we're not going to force you to do that. So if you, for instance, if you just want to leverage the OCR solution, but then still use, maybe you have an existing approval workflow already built and you're using it, you don't want to change things, absolutely fine. We're not going to, it's not going to get in our way. We're not going to break anything. So we're very flexible in what we can do, and we're not really, we tried to build this in a way that it's not going to require a lot of work or any work to support existing customizations or forms that you already have pre-configured for vendor bills.
Awesome. That was really well spoken, Seth. This next question is interesting. Can the system read foreign language invoices such as French?
We can follow that. We haven't, it's not a use case we've supported yet, but we can, if you want to learn, if you want to talk more, we can reach out to David and we can set up a call.
Yeah, definitely. The next question is, can approvals be routed based on dollar amounts?
Yep, so our approval solution, or the approval engine that's built into Advanced Bill Management, it's very flexible and powerful. So I showed a very basic example of kind of two-step approval process. But you can very easily set up thresholds to say maybe a step is required if the vendor bill is over a certain amount. There's a lot you can do with it. And if you want to kind of dive into the details, we can set up another call, reach out to David. We can dive into kind of the power of our approval solution. But it's very flexible. And we've really built it in a way that doesn't really require any custom workflows or scripting. It's all done through click and configure to our solution to set up your approval process.
Awesome. And then do we have any payment partners set up for this? That might be a question for David.
Any payment partners? So in terms of like sending out the payment through NetSuite?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we don't have, we're not partnering currently with any payment partners. We're really just leveraging kind of the native NetSuite capability to generate payment, and then rely on other partners in the ecosystem if you want to kind of automate the payment side of things.
Mm-hmm. This next question I can answer myself from David McCown. You asked if you get a list of the new functions in Advanced Bill Management. We will be sending out a follow-up email after this session, and it'll have a list or a link directly to the product page. You can see a table with all the different functionality that we went through during this session. The next question is the system capable of routing an invoice for approval to multiple approvers? At times, portions of the bill go to different departments and approvers.
Yep, yeah, so it can definitely be configured to route to multiple employees. Maybe it's based off department, maybe it's based off of line level formation. Just a quick example of something we've done in the past. We've had a use case where a company is entering a vendor bill that has multiple lines. Each line has a different department, and each department has a specific approver that might be required. So we're able to configure our solution just through click and configure to say, look at all the departments on the line level to figure out who the approver should be, and then use that information to route it for approval.
Awesome. This next question is an interesting one too. So they say they never want to overbill a PO. The PO received quantity should always match the billed amount exactly. If the invoice does not match the PO or there is no PO available, can a notification be sent to the employee that a PO needs to be created, changed, and or received?
Yep, so you can definitely make it required using our solution that you do not exceed what has been entered on the purchase order. So the demo I went through allowed you to save it with a threshold exceeded. But there's actually a setting in our solution that says do not allow that. And it would still show the three match violations on the screen, but you would not have a save with errors button. So you would be forced to press cancel and make a correction before you can even save the vendor bill. If you want to prevent someone from even saving a vendor bill without a purchase order, we don't have a kind of a setting out of the box to enable that, but it's something that would definitely be possible.
It's very configurable based on kind of what you need.
Yep.
Awesome. So we discussed this already. Can the POs be loaded from an email or drag and drop? So the answer is both.
Correct. Yep.
And then another question is about the pricing model. So that is actually listed on the product page as well on the website. So you'll have that link emailed out to you tomorrow and you can check out everything, the details, all the functionality, and the pricing structure. This next question is there a way to have the invoice accounted to the GL before it is fully approved? This person saying they would need the invoices to be in AP even if not fully approved.
Right. So if you're leveraging native NetSuite to have an approval status on your vendor bill, no. So like native NetSuite, when it's in a pending approval state, native NetSuite will not allow it to be GL impacting. There's workarounds to that, however. You can not leverage the native NetSuite approval status and do kind of a custom approval status. An example of something we've done in the past related to this would be when a vendor bill is saved, it gets behind the scenes in NetSuite. NetSuite's going to think it is fully approved, which will make it GL impacting. But we can add a custom approval status that really says it's not fully approved, and maybe you want to use the payment hold checkbox on a vendor bill. So when the vendor bill is saved, it's GL impacting, but it cannot be used for generating payment. And then once you go through our approval process and everyone is approved, behind the scenes, we can uncheck that payment hold checkbox, which will allow it to be used for payment purposes. So that's just one example of something we've done in the past where it is GL impacting upfront, but we kind of prevent it from being used downstream with using the payment hold checkbox.
Awesome. The next question is about three-way match. So if the item number or names do not match perfectly, will the three-way match work?
So the way it works is so it's not comparing the name or number to the purchase order to figure out which lines on your vendor bill correspond to which lines in the purchase order. NetSuite behind you don't see it on the screen, but at the time you're saving the vendor bill, the lines that you've entered are already they're related to the purchase order, even before you save the page. So if you were to go to one of the lines on the vendor bill and change the item, NetSuite would actually prevent you from saving that vendor bill. It's going to say you've changed this to an item that does not correspond to the item that was on the purchase order and stop you from saving it. So because we're kind of leveraging that native relationship between the vendor bill and the purchase order, just using native NetSuite, we avoid that type of scenario. And if you were to then go, let's say there were 3 lines on your vendor bill and they correspond to 3 lines on your purchase order, but then the person entering the vendor bill says, oh, I want to add a 4th line. Maybe it's a freight line or some other item or expense account. NetSuite's not going to stop you from doing that. But our three-way match engine will actually detect that. It's going to say, hey, you've added a 4th line, which does not correspond to any of the 3 lines on your purchase order. And it's actually going to report a violation and say that is not allowed. You can configure our solution to ignore certain items or expense accounts, basically meaning you will allow employees to add additional lines to your vendor bill, which doesn't actually correspond to the purchase order, and you can say that is okay. A common use case of that might be for freight or maybe tax, if you're capturing that as a separate line.
Awesome. So this next question is, can you configure approvals on the PO to be automated based on various dimensions, such as cost center, dollar threshold? And then they added, this is probably a question for the approval solution as opposed to bill management.
Yeah, so you absolutely, you can dynamically, basically you can dynamically change how the approval process flows based off of criteria, like the amount or the subsidiary department. It's very flexible in terms of what you can do. And while it is a question for our separate approval solution product, Advanced Bill Management behind the scenes leverages that product. So when you buy Advanced Bill Management, you're kind of getting the approval solution included behind the scenes. So it is a kind of a question for both. If you're only concerned about approvals and you don't need OCR or any of the Advanced Bill Management features, absolutely you could go and just use our approval solution. It would have the same functionality to support approvals. But Advanced Bill Management is a great product. It packages approvals, the OCR, throw match all together into a great cohesive product that helps streamline AP and automate things.
Awesome. So this next question, I don't think we've addressed it yet. Does the system send reminder emails for approvals not being done timely?
And it's a common question that comes up. So usually how we handle that is during implementation time. We'll discuss how the reminders should work. And typically what we do is we set up a save search as part of the implementation to send out the reminder emails, just because we don't want to keep blasting approvers with emails. And usually employees prefer kind of a summary email that shows all of the transactions that are pending their approval. So we usually leverage a save search during implementation to do that. And that's something we would help set up and configure for you.
Awesome. And this next question, we discussed it already. It's, can a specific department be forced to have the PO, and does NetSuite recognize that?
Can a specific department be forced to have it? So if the question is, like if someone is selecting a department on a vendor bill, can you require that it has a purchase order selected? So nothing there's like no out of the box setting that we have in our solution that would set that up. But it's also not a very complex kind of requirement to configure in NetSuite. So typically something like that would be part of any implementation. We would discuss what your requirements are. Our implementation process does have time available to do customizations like that. So typically it's probably something we can do. It's just not something that is going to click and configure through our solution.
Awesome. And then this last question just came in with the freight piece. Is it possible to use your solution to split the freight across the line items? And this person says that they believe it's typically referred to as landed cost.
We don't have any functionality related to that currently.
Okay. And then this question, what about recurrent invoices related to debit charges to the bank account? Same vendor debiting the bank account every month.
So if you just want to create the same vendor bill every month, you might just leverage native NetSuite to have like a memorized transaction to support that use case. We don't have anything related to that like as part of our solution though.
Okay. This question just came in. Do you have an implementation checklist so we can easily send our needs? Seems like there's a lot we can do here, but the implementation team and customizations are key.
Yeah, we actually have a data sheet that talks about what our implementation contains. And definitely reach out to David. He can send you more information about our implementation and kind of common questions that we ask during an implementation.
Awesome. On that note, David, will you put the contact information back up on the screen?
Let me stop sharing. All right, David, you can share.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. That was a great session. We had a ton of questions, so we could really get into really in depth with all the different functionalities of the solution. I want to let you all know I mentioned it, but we will be following up with an email that will have a link to this product, as well as a link to our LinkedIn page. You can follow us for more NetSuite information. And if there's another webinar coming up soon, you'll have the first notice. And if you have any additional questions, you can use the contact information on your screen to reach right out to David. Any other questions that come up, if you want to discuss this further, feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you very much, everybody. We hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.